Should there be congressional term limits? Let's talk about it. So in 1951, Congress passed the 22nd Amendment limiting the president to 2 terms. They didn't want the president to have too much power. But what about Congress? What about Congress having too much power? So today we're going to talk about term limits. We're going to talk about the pros of having term limits. We're going to talk about the cons about having term limits. We're also going to look at who has been in Congress the longest. When we look at the Senate and we look at the House, how long have some of those people been there? And then I'm going to have some questions for you to think about in your brain, to put in the comments, so we can have a discussion about this. So let's begin. So first, let's look at a list of senators who have been in the Senate for more than 12 years. So senators serve 6-year terms. So there are 41 senators who have been in the Senate for more than 12 years. 17 of them are Republican and 24 of them are Democrat. As you can see on my charts, I have it broken down by name, year elected, and years in Congress. Some of these names we probably all know if we're adults and we follow politics at all. Chuck Grassley and Mitch McConnell have both been in the Senate for 43 years and 39 years. I am 32 years old. That means these 2 men have been in the Senate for my entire life. You've also got people such as Susan Collins and Dick Durbin at 27 years, Chuck Schumer at 25 years, Lindsey Graham at 21 years, Bob Menendez at 18 years, which he's going through some legal stuff right now, Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, 17 years, Chris Coons and Joe Manchin at 14 years, which Joe Manchin is not running for re-election, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson at 13 years. So we have 41 senators who have been in the Senate for 12 years or more. So when we look at the House does have a greater number, so they are going to have more representatives who have been in the House for 12 years or more. So the House has 435 members. Of those 435, 112 of them have been in the House for 12 years or more. They are not all on this chart. I will have a couple more pages of everyone else. So I will say a few of the members on the list for the House and the list for the Senate have either passed away, have left in the last couple months, but this is who was there as of May of 2024. All right, so of the 112, 51 of them are Republican and 61 of them are Democrats. As you can see, there are 3 people who have been in Congress for 43 years, just like Chuck Grassley has been in the Senate. So going down the list, we're going to see names we know. Nancy Pelosi, 37 years. Everyone from Maxine Waters up has been in Congress longer than I have been alive, because I am 32. So Maxine Waters, 33 years. Nancy Pelosi, 37. Jerry Nadler, 32. Let's see, who else are big names we know? Sheila Lee Jackson, 29. She did just pass away, Sheila Lee Jackson did. But as you can see, everyone on this page has been in Congress, in the House, for over 25 years. Like, I'm still in elementary school, and these people have already been in the House. That's a long time. Moving on to the next page, we have people who've been in the House for 23 years down to 15 years. As you can see, there is a lot. You have a lot in this 2007 range. You have a lot in actually all these ranges except for 2008. You have a lot of people who have been there 23, 21, 19, 17, 15 years. And then the last little page I have are the people who've been there 13 years and 12 years. There is a big group in this 2011 that have been in there for 13 years. So when we look at the pros and the cons, I want to say the information that I have, the opinions that I'm going to tell are things that I have found from research, from essays, from polls, and some of them are personal opinions, but a lot of them are me doing this research and pulling stuff together with people who overwhelmingly either had the same ideas on pros or had the same ideas on cons. So let's look at 5 pros for term limits. So the first pro is Americans overwhelmingly support term limits. So there was a poll in 2023 and 83% of Americans supported term limits. And this was a bipartisan poll. 86% Republican, 84% Independent, and 80% Democrats. They agree with some sort of congressional term limit. As of when I made my chart earlier, 112 people in the House and 41 people in the Senate had been in Congress for more than 12 years. So, first point, Americans overwhelmingly support term limits. Second point, term limits would make representatives more responsive to their constituents. So incumbents are so secure when it comes to re-election. that they feel like they don't need to be as connected to the citizens. They have money coming in. They have the power that they can hire people to campaign for them. They usually do come in with more money than people running against them. If there were term limits, there would be more open seat races, and you would get to see different candidates, different ideas, different opinions, instead of just saying, oh, well, I know this person's name, so I'm just going to vote for them, even though I don't know what they stand for, because I know their name. So like, they just must be important. Number 2 is where I also think age might come into play when it comes to term limits. So the 118th Congress, which is the 2023 to 2025 Congress, is one of the oldest Congresses in American history. So the median age of a senator is 65. The median age of a representative is 58. The median age for an American is 38.2. There's a big difference here. And I understand people are going to say, like, they're experienced, but do they have the life and are they living the same life the people today are? So I think the representation part is where age comes in, and we really need to look at who we are electing into office. The third pro would be term limits would ensure that Congress is composed of people with real world experience and not career politicians. So when the first Congress happened, George Washington wanted statesmen. There were farmers, there were politicians, but they weren't career politicians. There were lawyers, there were doctors. And that is what Congress should be made up of today. We need more people with everyday skills in Congress. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, businessmen, parents. We need people who are not career politicians. From what I saw in my research, a lot of people feel like career politicians are out of touch with reality. They're not making and having to survive on the same type of money we are. They're not having to make decisions in life. Do I get this medicine, or do I pay my electric bill, or do I buy food for my family? They're out of touch with reality. And a pro for term limits would give people with real world experience a chance to actually come in and say, these are the problems that real Americans are facing, and let's make an impact. Ronald Reagan said, the only experience you get in politics is how to be a politician. So the fourth pro is it could mitigate corruption and abuse of power. So the longer you're in a position, the more power you're going to get, the more sway you're going to have over people, the more you're going to be able to get people to do what you want to do. And having term limits could discourage this complacency we have in the Senate. This could discourage the corruption. It could discourage the power that people are getting. There are people in the House and the Senate who some would say are more powerful than the president. A frequent turnover in these elected officials could really help balance the power and keep some people from having so much power over Congress. So the fifth pro is that term limits would restore respect for Congress. So Congress's rating is like at an all-time low. Like, people don't respect Congress. They don't have trust in Congress. They don't have faith in Congress. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. It's a bipartisan that there's not faith and trust in Congress. So term limits would ensure that members of Congress are being held accountable. They're there for the right reasons. And they're not there just to gain power. So we're going to talk about 4 cons of term limits. The first one is term limits would destabilize the legislative branch. So some of the cons that I found were Congress would be full of lame duck members, the legislative branch would become really ineffective, that Congress would have super hyper-partisanism, and that it would be really hard to get things done. Congress and the legislative branch would pretty much fall apart. And the second con about term limits is saying that voters in the government benefit from experienced members in Congress. They're saying the longer you're in Congress, the more you learn, and the better you are able to do your job, the more you know loopholes, the more you know the law. And they're saying that if you are constantly trying to rotate at least every 12 years or so, that it would make lawmaking inefficient. You're not going to know the loopholes. You're not going to know the laws as well. You're not going to know who you need to contact for this or for that. So one of the cons is you would not have as experienced members in Congress. The third con would be we already have term limits. They're called elections. So if people wanted somebody different in Congress, they would vote for that person. Every 2 years for the House, every 6 years for the Senate, we vote. And if we wanted someone different, we would vote for them. Side note, if they believe that we already have term limits called elections for Congress, why did they put term limits on the president? All right, back to regular programming. And the fourth con would be weakening of checks and balances. So where you would have this constant rotation every 12, 14, whatever years or so, they're saying the cons would be that you were going to weaken the legislative branch, which would give the judicial branch and the executive branch more power. You're not going to have people in Congress who are able to have sway over others to help make big decisions. And they're saying a con would be the weakening of checks and balances and the weakening of the legislative branch. So before I go into some questions for discussion and to talk about and to think about, I'm going to give you my opinion. So when I talk about politics, I really try to stay as level as I can. If you have followed me for a little while, you might be able to guess which side of the aisle I'm on a little bit, but I have voted in my life for Democrats, I've voted for Republicans, and I've voted independent. So I vote based off the person. With that being said, I agree with term limits. I think there should be term limits, whether it's 12 years, whether it's 12 years for the House and 18 years for the Senate, because they do 6-year terms in the Senate. There should be term limits. We put term limits on the president, saying you can't serve more than 8 years elected because we don't want you to have too much power. Yet Congress is not saying the same thing about them. They're not saying, oh, well, we might get too much power. They're just like, oh, no, the president can't have all this power, but we can stay here as long as we want. I don't agree with that. And I really think there should be congressional term limits. Incumbents do come with more money. They're able to organize and they're able to campaign better than new people. And that is one reason they get reelected, especially because of name recognition. So I think there should be term limits. And term limits will not happen if Congress votes on it because they're not going to vote themselves out of office. So the only way to do it is going to be the people push for it and the people somehow get it on the ballot. Let's talk about some questions for discussion. I would love for you to leave your answer in the comments so we can look at them and we can discuss it. So should Congress be subjected to term limits? If yes, what limit would you impose and why? And if no, explain your answer. The second question I'm going to post is, should the U.S. Supreme Court have term limits? Why or why not? And the third question I'm going to post is, should other government positions be subjected to term limits? Congressional staff, congressional aides, even the White House chef. Should other people in Washington, D.C. have term limits? So let me know your answers in the comments. I really am excited to see what people think. So term limits, a very fiery subject. You have people in Congress who are for term limits and you have people in Congress who are against term limits. I personally don't think they will ever be passed if Congress has all the power to pass them. So I really think that that's something that the voters really need to push to get on the ballot to push for term limits. So like I said, posted some questions. I would love to see your responses in the comments. And until next time, see you later.